the tree. Okay, now we want to print this. So you go File, Print, but not yet. We have a few things we need to look at. Start out by going up to the word Image and going down to Resize Image Size. Notice up front that the image has a size of 24.7 megs. You can see that down here too. It has a width and a height of 3600 by 2400 pixels. Now, if you multiply that number times that number, the number of pixels in this image is actually 160,000 little tiny bricks that make up that image. Ignore this up here. We're going to print. We looked at this in the previous lesson. Now we focus down here. Now this image, if you're measuring in inches, is 50 inches by 33. That's like, wow, I don't really want something that big. I was thinking about like maybe 8 by 10 or something. That's a little bit too big. And oh man, look at that resolution. Now, Andy, I know enough about resolutions to know that that's not going to print. That's like a screen resolution, and you're totally correct. So you see, the first thing we need to do is change the resolution. Well, not yet, but let me show you what happens if you do. We have everything on, including resample. So turn everything on, change that to 300. That is the magic number. We now have an image that's 429.2 megabytes. It was 24.7. So we've increased the size of this image by 400 megs, and we have not done one thing for its quality. Because those additional pixels that we're adding, which would be in the millions, are not doing anything but adding blank paint to the image. The original image with the original pixels is 160,000 pixels. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, that's the Option key on a Mac. See the little reset come up? I love that. And we'll take us back to the way we were. When you're working on the internet, when you're trying to make things smaller, it's imperative that you have that on. Not now. Turn it off. Now you will notice we can no longer change the number of pixels in the image, but we can compress those real resolution pixels into a smaller space. So this actually becomes like a big calculator. If you need something, you say, well, how big of an image can I get at a resolution of 300? Watch what happens to the width and the height when I change that to 300. 8 by 12 with a resolution of 300. You say, well, I want a width of 10. So come up here and change this one. 360 resolution, but now it's 10 by 6. Now let's take that back to 300. Just like that. So we have a width of 12 and a height of 8. And I want an 8 by 10, not an 8 by 12. Now I'm not going to get an 8 by 12 unless I crop. That's my decision to make. So I think I'm going to do that. So I like what I see. This is off because we're not resampling. If I click OK, stays the way it was, except the dimensions are now 12 by 8. So if we come over here to our cropping tool, now in the previous lesson, we used the rectangular marquee and said image crop. This time I'm going to do it through this tool right here. So if you open up that tool and go into the options, you've got options here to change it. So for example, I want a width of 10 inches. So the default is for me inches, but if it isn't for you, you have to type in inches or it'll go back to whatever its default is. And I'm going to go into a height of 8 inches. My resolution is 300. Now, if you leave that blank, it would leave it at its default resolution of 300, so that wouldn't really change anything. But the way we're doing it now is a little bit different than using this up here, and let me explain. Let me come back out so we can see the image here. We already have our tool set up, 10 by 8, 300. If I come over here and begin, say, doing that, if I stop there and I click the little check mark, the area I have selected will become 10 inches by 8 inches at a resolution of 300. So you have a whole lot more control doing it through the cropping tool than doing it through the rectangular marquee. Whatever I decide to make, I can move it over to here. Let me go ahead and put this back over maybe toward the corner and start bringing it out some more. That's as far as I can go if I want to go to 8 inches. So I have to crop out of some of the areas if I want to go 8 by 10. But whatever I choose using the cropping tool, that will be 8 by 10. I like that. I'm going to stick there and click here. All right. I like that. Now we can go up to the word File and go down to Print. Now, the options that you see here very possibly will look different depending on your operating system and a lot of other factors going on, even your printer. But over here is select the printer. You got more than one, go ahead and select it. You can select the paper size that's in the tray. Now mine's using US letter, that's 8.5 by 11, but whatever your paper size is, envelopes, whatever you got. Orientation, portrait or landscape. Print size is 8 by 10. Now I can crop to fit, but I don't have to because I made the image the size it was supposed to be. I don't have to crop it to fit it. How many copies do you want? Now if we come down here, you have two other areas that are going to be different based on your system and your printer. If I go to page setup, I can come in here and change. I want photo paper, of course. How many copies? Now my printer does two-sided printing. I don't want that for photo, but it does. That's why that's there. How many pages? You want to save it as a PDF? You can do that here too. Now when you make these changes here and click save, they become permanent until you change them again. You also have more options down here, and you can do things like show a date, show a caption, the file name. You want a border. You want it as an iron-on transfer, and so you'd flip the image. Do you want trim guidelines like crop marks to cut it out? I don't need any of that stuff, but let's go ahead and get out of here. And you have your print options here. Now, when you click there, again, this would be different based on your printer, and I do believe most of us have been here before. We've printed things before, and you probably know your way around here. We've got our presets back up here again, just like you saw. The number of pages and copies. Click print. There you go. Now, I will say one thing about your printing papers. I chose photo paper. I would strongly suggest if you have an HP printer or Canon or whatever you have, is that you at least start with their photo papers, because their papers are designed to work with their inks to give you the best image possible. There are other kinds of papers out there, like silk papers and watercolor kind of papers that might not be HP or Canon or whatever, and you might want to experiment with them. But if you're just doing regular photography kind of stuff in printing, the best papers to use are the ones from the manufacturer. Let's go ahead and close out of here. We don't have to save it. If you want to print, you're really only a few steps away, but the best thing to do before you print is get it set up to size and resolution before you get to the print option.